Okay, I think we will start. Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to our webinar, Be Ready for the New Normal, Supporting Teaching and Learning. My name is Danielle Wittig and I'm your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, I'd like to draw your attention to the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. We'd really like to hear from you and we'd love to include your comments, thoughts and questions. You can also use the chat function, which you will also find on the right-hand side of your screen. Just select Host from the drop-down menu and send your question directly to me. I will collect all your questions or comments and pass them on to our presenters at the end of the session. If we run out of time for your input, we will definitely contact you separately afterwards. This webinar is being recorded and we will send you the link to the recording within the next few days. And now I'm very pleased to introduce you today to our presenters. First, welcome Paula Fitzpatrick, the Head of Information Systems, and Steve Harding, System Developer at Newcastle University. They will focus in the presentation on meeting the new normal, COVID and beyond. I'm also pleased to welcome David Duffield, the Project Manager at the Copyright Licensing Agency here in the UK. He will speak about how to support remote learning with the Digital Content Store DCS works. And last but not least, maximize the use of your reading list tool for remote or hybrid learning is going to be the topic of Dr. Tamas Sadeh's presentation, our VP Teaching and Learning Solution at Exlibris. I'm looking forward to see all this presentation and I'm happy to hand over to David now.
So yeah, as you can see on the screen, this talk will be how CLA and primarily the DCS are supporting higher education licensees during COVID-19, but as the session name implicates that there may be some things that are just the new normal moving beyond that as well. Some things are specific to COVID-19 and I'll state exactly what they are. So if we look at the agenda, first up, I'm going to discuss the content in the DCS and the content repository, as that has been so invaluable at this time. I'll be looking at the reporting and the actual content access for students. I'll be looking at our enhanced higher education supply service, which we have in collaboration with the British Library for supplying content remotely during this time. And finally, the COVID-19 temporary extent limits we have in place at the moment, which are the part that's specific to COVID-19. Everything else is continuous for now and beyond. So firstly, to look at the content repository. So in lockdown and beyond, one of the most important ways that the DCS has supported remote learning was via the content repository that we have in the DCS. So since the DCS was launched in July of 2016, over 325,000 content items have been added to the DCS repository, and that's predominantly book chapters and journal articles, because that is what's copied under our license. These content items are from a range of book chapters and journal articles, and as I said, they have to be copied under our license to be shared in the repository. I'm going to show you now a breakdown of the content uploads in the DCS. So that's how new content has been uploaded throughout the period that the DCS has been live. There was an initial peak, as you can see, a really massive one for the first onboardings, and also it was because we had 5 pilot partners and all their content was added automatically to the live DCS. And then there has been a steady increase, peaks and flows of when that happened over time, usually peaking in the summer, early autumn. So that's when we tend to have people add in their content into the DCS, mostly via normal requests. But occasionally you can see a little additional peak, and that often means that someone is onboarding their content in bulk. So new users to the DCS are invited to bulk upload all their historic licensed content into the DCS, all the PDFs that they used to have lying around the virtual learning environment or linked through reading list. And they are invited to add them in bulk using a spreadsheet, which I've got a screenshot of on the left-hand side, but also through adding the files themselves to our cloud account, which you can see on the right-hand side. We will even strip the cover notices off for historic cover notices that we use under our license. All items in the DCS can be previewed, so you can preview every item before you select it. They are DRM-free, which allows you to adjust them before re-uploading. You can download them. You can run them through any processing, especially for those who have accessibility tools like AbiFine or Adobe. You can run them through then and then re-upload. And you can always add your own new document if the content that's in the DCS isn't up to your standards, or if the material is not available, which is the most common reason why people upload their own content, because what's been requested isn't yet in the repository. Originally, the area of the DCS where we hold the content repository, source content, it required an exact match, exact ISBN and page range. You know, that could be difficult. You rely on the academic to actually send the exact information, or the subject librarian or whoever it is, to be able to match exactly the metadata from the DCS. We've opened that up a bit. After a few years, the rights holders were a bit more comfortable with us opening it up a little. So now it shows all the books in the DCS from that title, all the chapters from that title, and it shows the extract details so you can actually see the chapters. You can see an example on the page now where you can see extracts from chapter 2 and then details about chapter 5 and chapter 6, chapter 7 also in there. And that will help if your academic has just said, I don't know the page range, it's chapter 6, and then you can find that and select it. You can still use that preview button that I mentioned before to make sure that it is accurate and it is up to the quality that you need. But what we do to ensure that it is about still fulfilling a request and not about just picking and choosing from what you find is we push requests up to the top depending on how they match and the page ranges that you do search for. That little star that you can see on the top items, that's because they're an exact match for the page ranges that were searched for. So we're still trying to make sure that what you've actually searched for is pushed up to the top, but what we don't want to happen is for institutions to be unable to find the chapter that's already in the DCS just because the page range is that they search for are not an exact match. And for journals, we can't really place it like this for articles, but what we've done is given a grace of 20 pages either way so that you can hopefully find the journal article even if your page range isn't exact. So what are our next steps to build this repository? We are looking at options how we can make material more accessible on the DCS or just support accessibility. And for now, we've created some recommendations on how to add accessible copies. And there's a link to that, and we're going to send a PDF copy of my slides. You can click on all these links afterwards. And we're also inviting publishers to create a new API to add their original content. That might be a real game changer coming soon. So we're hoping some publishers are going to sign up to that and allow the DCS to start pulling in their ebook chapters for users of the DCS to actually use to help reduce that scanning level even more. So in terms of reporting in the DCS, well, firstly, we should start with how the content is accessed. So it's accessed remotely, obviously, via our intuitive student reader. The reader opens the same in all browsers and supports students to read, print, download to PDF, search the document, and search the internet and copy to a clipboard, and it's available in English and in Welsh. So that's how it's accessed remotely. That link is placed on the virtual learning environment or the reading list system. I'll get there in a second. It's via authenticated links, so it does use federated authentication such as Shibboleth or Athens or Easy Proxy for proxy authentication. And like I said, the link can be placed wherever you need it. And of course, it would behoove me to mention as I'm in this Ex Libris webinar that we have that workflow can be fully supported by an end-to-end workflow with the Leganto reading list system, where you can make requests from Leganto, as you can see on the right-hand side, and even see the check permissions tool in Leganto at that point to see if it's opted in for photocopying, scanning, and digital. And then that request can be made into the DCS, the benefits of which are obvious in that it pulls from the connector that you have to Alma, so the metadata that you have for your discovery layers, and then populates into the DCS automatically. But obviously the final benefit is when you complete that creation in the DCS, the link that's generated automatically goes out back into the reading list system. That usually happens in a task overnight, but I believe you can also force that change in the ALMA system if for example, an academic needs it urgently. And what we found is that a lot of people are asking about how their material is being used, especially during this period, how remote learning and the remote access via the DCS has been affected by coronavirus, and how institutions have managed to still provide the same access to content. So one of the ways you can find that out in the DCS is via our reporting suite. Most of the reader interactions can be reported via our reports. So you can see the number of clicks, number of prints, number of downloads to PDF, and the length of time materials that's been used overall in the reader. I've created a guide that goes into this in a bit more detail that I've linked to, where you can actually, I'll show you how you can go in and check your student year-on-year data to see your student usage, and also your request year-on-year data. So how many requests for content items under the license have been made for this year compared to last year. Two things are required for that. Obviously, you would have had to been using the DCS for those 2 years for us to collect that data. If not, if you've just been using it a year, you can obviously see it for just this year. But the really good thing about the number of clicks is you can, or the student access is you can see that for any specific range of time. You can see on the screen here that I'm searching for a specific month. This was specifically for the first month of coronavirus, so the lockdown really. So you can see the impact that that direct effect had on student usage. I want to give you a bit of information about overall the patterns that we've seen. So across the year that the DCS has been in operation, a very familiar pattern can be seen. And you can see this on the screen with familiar peaks and troughs. It almost looks like one of those heartbeats in casualty or something when, you know, the patient is, well, they're doing all right. The good thing is you can kind of see the patterns, the peaks in the autumn. We especially see a peak around about now, and then how it dies down a bit for Christmas, then increases again in the new year. And as you can see, over the summer, there's a real flatlining, much less content use. But what we've seen with coronavirus is those familiar patterns have mostly kept stable. So what that means is students from across the UK, from our users, have continued to be able to use their content as much as they ever were, despite the restrictions that have been in place for them. So that's how you can use your reporting to find out a bit more about how your institution has fared with coronavirus, and perhaps benchmark for yourself to see why there may have been decreases if there were, or answer senior managers if there were, if it's been stable, or even if you've seen any increases, you can always forward that along. But I do also want to highlight the Enhanced Higher Education Supply Service. The Enhanced Higher Education Supply Service, or EHES, is another way that CLA supports your remote learning, and it's delivered by CLA and the British Library. CLA do the account management for it, and the British Library obviously supply all the scans and do the scanning. EHES provides HIs with scans that are also DRM-free, and they are also OCR as standard. And the British Library obviously has a vast collection that can be accessed via the service. They're based in Boston Spa, and it's a huge and very impressive scanning service, and I've actually been there once, and it does involve robots collecting books from their vast collection. So it really is the best place to find anything that you might be looking for. The service allows for outsourced scanning, so just scan something that I already own on my behalf, but it also allows HIs to purchase copyright fee paid copies. If you're not aware with some of the terminology under our license, that basically gives you the right of ownership for something you don't already own. So perhaps in our ALMA integration that the DCS also has, it flags that you don't own that book. And then when you order it from the British Library, you can order it at copyright fee paid, which gives you the right of ownership for that specific chapter or for that specific article, as opposed to when you buy a book and you have the right of ownership for the whole book. The DCS offers a full end-to-end integration with eHES, so it allows the orders to be made in the DCS, sent off to the BL for the scan to be made, and then returned directly into the platform as well, where users can check on the order, they can report any problems, update page ranges, view the order, and accept the order. They can also run reports on their DCS eHES orders, and you can get it set up for email updates on your order. So when the order comes through, you get an email saying, you know, your order has been updated, a link directly into the request so you can go in and see what the update is, and hopefully the update is your scan is ready. So to support our eHES customers through the current crisis, CLA are temporarily waiving the service charge for all copyright fee pay scans. So when you already pay that copyright fee for something that you don't own, we will waive the service charge that is applied. The charge is still made by the BL and is still seen in the DCS, but will be settled by a CLA during the time, and the charges will revert back to normal following the end of the next academic year, so after the 31st of July 2021. So yes, that's a removal of all service charge from copyright fee pay copies acquired through the eHES service. Obviously, if you're just outsourcing a scan, so something that you already own, you just want to be able to scan on your behalf so you don't have to, a service charge will still be applied, as that's the only charge for those orders. But for CFPs, there will be no service charge for this academic year. So now something very specific to COVID-19. Everything that I've said before is part of the new normal. It was here before. It's really helped during the coronavirus as we've moved to a remote learning style, but it will still remain afterwards. But the COVID-19 temporary extent limits are something that we've added specifically for this academic year. So following dialogue with rights holders, we announced that there will be a temporary increase of extent limits on an opt-in basis of 20% or 2 chapters, whatever is the greater. And as you can see by that reference to chapter, it's for books only published by participating publishers. It does exclude anthologies, plays and poetry, and it only applies when a digital edition is not available through commercial channels, because it's for those materials you can't get access to otherwise. And they have to be available through the DCS or another approved workflow system and removed by the 31st of July 2021. And it's available to all higher education institutions in the UK and Ireland. And we've got a number of publishers opted in. It's up to 170 opted-in publishers now. You can see an up-to-date list on our website. And if you're an ICLA customer, there's a link to that for any Irish customers that we may have. And that's everything from me. I hope you found this interesting. If you do have any questions about how we're helping or anything moving forward, let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. This was indeed very interesting. While I'm handing over to Paul, I just would like to remind the audience, please feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A box. You can find these 2 boxes on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to send us any comments, questions that you might have. I'm happy to put them to the presenters afterwards. Thank you, David, and it's your stage, Paula. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for my presentation. Sorry. I don't seem to have my presentation.
Sorry, say again?
I don't seem to have my presentation. Is that?
Is it? This is what I received. Is this wrong?
What Paula means, sorry, is it still on David's last slide?
Okay, I changed it back. Tamar, could you quickly help me what you're seeing? Okay, let me do it this way.
David's last.
Okay, maybe
okay. That's it. That's great. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, sorry for this. Here we go.
Right. Okay. Well, hello everyone. It's nice to be here. I might have met a lot of you before. I think my name's Paula Fitzpatrick, and Stephen Harding is here with me as well.
Hello everyone.
I'm sure you know, a lot of you know, but just to give the usual slide, we are up in the northeast of England. We have approximately 26,000 students, 6,500 staff. Just thinking about COVID, which is some of what we're going to touch on today. It's a campus that's very close to the city centre. And we have Northumbria. I think there's some colleagues here from Northumbria today, just minutes away. So combined, we've got a student population in Newcastle of about 55,000 students. So obviously, that was a concern. And straight away, similar to probably a lot of you, when the students came back in September, we saw a big spike in the number of COVID cases, which saw us in early October moving into the Department for Education Tier 3. It's very confusing with all the tiers, but we're currently in Tier 3. I don't think I'll introduce ourselves again. That's what we do. I head up the very small digital library services team. I work with Stephen, and some of you might have met Scott as well. We deal with all the ex-Lupus projects. Stephen's got a special role in the grant, or does a lot on the grant, probably much more than me. I've worked more on the ALMA side. What I thought we could look at today, and what I wanted to say to preface this really is it's very early still. We're still in the middle of this crisis. We're certainly not at the end of it. So that some of the things I'm going to say are some very early thoughts and very early impressions about what it's meant for us, how it's changed the way we work and the services and the collections. But I'm sure a lot of you have had similar journeys to us. But just to give a really rough timeline, and again, I think this is probably very similar to a lot of your institutions. So we just about ran out the buildings on the 20th of March. We closed the library. We were starting to send people home, but then we actually closed the doors. I'm not going to go through all this because I think you probably have a similar timeline, but there are some things on there that you probably didn't have, which really increased the complexity for us. We went live with the new VLE in August. That wasn't handled by us, that was handled by central services, but it had an impact on the way we teach and the way we deliver content. And then in September, we had a big cyber attack, which was a lot of work. Most of our services went. We couldn't use an awful lot of things that we rely on very heavily. Things in the cloud were okay, so Alma, Primo, thankfully that was all okay. But that really, we've had, same as everybody else, but we've had a tough year. At the minute, all these tiers, we are in the North East England, we're in Tier 2 of the national kind of lockdown, but we are in Tier 3 of the DFE tier. So at the minute, there's very limited face-to-face teaching. Some staff in the building in order to deliver some of those services, but there's very much a skeleton staff in the library and a capacity of about 20-25% staff. We've started, similar to a lot of you, I think, delivering things like laptops and books to students who are self-isolating. I'll talk a bit more about that later. We've had to, because the capacity is reduced in the library, we've had to look at other spaces where we can offer study space. So we're helping with some what we call pop-up libraries in other buildings on campus. And I think I saw in the press the other day that Durham University are even using local hotels in order to provide that space because the capacity in the buildings is limited. Oops, skipped a slide there, sorry. what I thought would be useful to do, and I'm not going to say, I'm going to hold my hand up here and say that I did a tiny bit of research for this, and this came from quite an interesting article that I found that I reference later on. But I think it's quite useful to think of COVID and the impact it's had in the effect of these kind of four things. So collections, the services that we run, the space, which I'm not going to talk about a lot, even though there's a lot of work going on there. I am going to concentrate quite a bit on just on collections and services and a little bit on operations. So similar, again, this will resonate with a lot of you, I think, but the main impact on kind of collections and services, I think, teaching staff, library teaching staff, massive, huge impact in terms of moving all that content online. You know, I think they've been absolutely exhausted doing that. I'm sure it's very similar where you are. Moving to ebook purchasing as standard, so that's a huge amount of work for our acquisitions department. Because of that, there's been a lot of amending and adding to links on Leganto. Stephen's going to have a look at some of those figures in a bit to see how the use of Leganto has gone up quite a bit. What we have found, and I talked to a few of our liaison colleagues who teach, is they've spent an awful lot of time explaining ebook licenses to students and to academics, where they probably academics haven't been that involved in that conversation before, and you know that they're really kind of worn out, and it is complicated. We all know ebook licensing is complicated, and me and Stephen had a quick conversation, and we just wondered, you know, is that something that maybe Leganto could help with? Could we have something on Leganto which maybe said, this is the license, this is what it is, you know, if it's a one-person license or it's a 20-user license or whatever? Because, you know, as I say, I think we've spent a lot of time explaining licensing rules to academics. I think the other thing that it's shown us, again, is how important the library website is. This idea of the library website as a kind of front door. We were quite lucky. Stephen and his team has just run a project to reinvigorate our library website. So we were in a good position. But I think it during and still now, I think the library website is so important in flagging, you know, things that are constantly changing. That is constantly changing at the minute. What it has made us think about as well, though, is some of those digital journeys, and maybe I'll talk a little bit later about the work that I think it's made us think that we still have to do. And I think that kind of digital UX, we still might have a bit of work to do around that. But what I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's worth mentioning that the massive impact on staff, again, common to you all probably. Isolation. I was just talking to Tamar there before the call started, and when we came out the buildings in March, I remember having a conversation with my line manager to say, oh, well, you know, it'll be about 5 to 7 weeks, something like that. None of us ever expected to be nearly Christmas and we're still mainly out of the buildings. And I think the thing that we forget is, certainly I'm on at least 1 or 2 or 3 sometimes Zoom meetings a day. There are a body of staff there who do not even have that Zoom contact, and we'll be looking really shortly at having been out the building for nearly a whole year, and that's not a good place to be, I don't think. Other things as well, we all know we're missing that kind of bouncing off each other, that kind of meeting each other in the coffee room. Something that somebody mentioned to me as well, that comes from not being together in the building, I think we found is a little bit creeping in now of, oh, well, we're working harder than they are, you know, a little bit of that, well, technical services are maybe working harder than another section, because there isn't, I think, that cohesion because we're not all in the building. I thought this was quite interesting. Again, just doing a little bit of research. I think we were in a good position that call. You know, we have been operating in a digital, you know, world. A lot of a lot of our material is digital, we're well covered in terms of databases and journals and ebooks. So when we did go into full lockdown, there was still, broad access to most things. What wasn't there, of course, was access to the physical stock. And as the buildings have reopened, this is the one that's become tricky. So I think it's quite interesting that this, we were able to deliver, yes, the digital stuff, but there was still a demand. I think on the next slide, I'll move on to the next slide actually. There's a quote from another quote, and I've referenced where this is from. Yes, I have at the bottom. That says that, if it's taught us anything, print collections have become, irrelevant. I think now that the buildings are reopened, and like a lot of you were doing a click and collect service, that's plainly not true. And Stephen's going to show you in a minute, the figures for click and collect have really, as term has come on, have really increased. We also had, I don't know, I think I was a little bit surprised by this, an awful lot of pressure during the full national lockdown, mainly from researchers who weren't able to get hold of interlibrary loan physical books. Now, as far as I know, the British Library were operating some sort of service, but we didn't have staff in the building to actually process them, so we couldn't. For the best part of that 4 to 5 months we were fully locked down, we couldn't provide that service. So I think it's maybe a little bit previous to say that we don't need those physical collections. I don't want to go through this whole list because I think this is probably, again, very familiar to all of you. When the libraries reopened, we immediately, when it was safe to do so, we began a click and collect service. These are the kinds of things that gives you an idea of the kind of work that we've had to do to get that service up and running. So changing a lot of terms of use, changing Primo screens. We chose to use LibCal in conjunction with Primo to get that kind of as seamless as we can, that picking up and notification to the user that their items were ready. Another thing that's training of staff actually as well. I wasn't involved in that, but I know that customer services, that has been a big. Staff weren't used to working in this way, and it was retraining staff in a totally different way. And another thing is that because the capacity of the libraries are diminished, we've had to try and offer self-issue return units in other buildings. So there's been quite a bit of work around that as well, kind of moving those units, changing those units, getting those units to work. And I think I'm going to hand over to Stephen now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm just going to add some facts and figures to what Paul has been saying. I apologise for this kind of graph because it's all kind of very familiar kind of graph that we've got on screen here, but this one's actually showing the uptake of our click and collect service that Paula was talking about. So as you can see here, as of Monday this week, we had our highest spike ever in daily click and collect requests. So we had around 900. And I think we're all expecting that will just steadily increase as students become more interested in loaning the physical stock that we have in our buildings. We're also offering, we are offering actually a click and post for self-isolating students and students who choose to study away from the campus. So not only are we fulfilling the collection slots, but we're also actually posting out through a mixture of methods. So we're delivering to on-campus accommodation through our own library vehicles. We're using local and UK-wide couriers as well. So a very big operation. Hopefully I've advanced the slide here. So one thing we've had that we've introduced in the last 5 weeks.
Steve.
Sorry?
Sorry for interrupting. Paula, could you move the slide? Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know who's got the control. Hopefully it's study space bookings, this one. Yeah, great. So one thing that we've introduced in the last around 5 weeks is the ability for students to actually come and study in the library. So we've introduced online bookings through the website and the app, And this allowed students as well to browse the shelves until the latest lockdown came into place, and they can't browse the shelves anymore, essentially. The online system allows them to book through different types of space. So, for example, with spaces with a PC, a desk or study rooms. We found the daily peaks, as you would kind of expect, between 1 and 5 p.m., sort of Monday to Thursday. We found that 83% of students check in, so there is a requirement to scan a QR code, and either those remaining 17% are not turning up or choosing not to check in. So we haven't actually worked out that one. As Paula said, a lot of this is in its infancy. It's brand new to us, so we're kind of spending a lot of time getting things working rather than having a look at facts and figures. So these are very early figures that we're looking at. And again, the chart on the right-hand side, you can see how things have picked up in the 4 weeks, the 4 full weeks since we've been offering this service to students, and it's almost hitting 7,000 bookings per week. So it's not per day, it's per week. And we just one thing to add: we're using more of the Spring Share system, so we're using LibCal for that because it's kind of built for that purpose. Next slide, Paula. Just some, I guess, some evidence and some feedback from our liaison team who are responsible for doing a lot of teaching. So they've reported that they're spending a lot more time creating resources for their teaching. So previously, where they would deliver teach sessions in a more face-to-face environment, they would find that there was a lot more natural interactivity with the students. As you know, on these kind of things on Zoom, it's a much more rigid and it's a lot more difficult to get feedback sometimes. So they've developed close to 200 student hours of online learning materials for the VLE, for the new VLE, which has taken a considerable amount of staff time. And we've created a lot of assets, so quizzes and videos, etc. And also, we've heard that academics have streamlined their own lists as well. I'm not exactly sure what is meant by that. Perhaps I'm guessing looking at what type of content is available, so maybe more of a push towards electronic rather than physical. And to build upon that as well, we found that there's a very high reliance upon ebook availability with high expectations that it will just be there automatically. So it's kind of maybe a bit of a learning curve that the academic community aren't aware of, that there's a lot of license restrictions that come with those expectations that maybe we need to communicate out. And as you would expect, we've done a bit more, quite a bit more scanning of book chapters as well, where we only have print available. Paula, could you move the next slide, please? And one final slide of just some facts and figures here for you. So in terms of reading lists, we've seen a significant increase in the number of active students. So this is through analytics. So active students, I believe, is anyone who interacts with a citation, or whether that's reading a citation or commenting or whatever. So we've seen a 51% increase compared to the same period of last year. So I guess June to October. So that's a very big increase. That could be down to the better integration with the new virtual learning environment that Paula mentioned. We've moved to Canvas, and it's much more readily available in our VLE baseline, but probably more likely due to the increase in online learning. Furthermore, we found a 27% increase compared again to the same period of last year on the number of full text views. So that will be again due to the same the increase in online learning, and probably likely as well more e-resources on the lists as well. A 7% increase as well in the number of scans on the digital content store, and that might seem quite low in comparison, and that's because we're comparing to all of last year. So we're 7% up just based on the 3 months, whereas we're comparing to the whole of last year. So I would imagine if we look at this figure again towards the end of the year, it will be much, much higher. We've seen a 50% increase in the number of courses that actually have reading lists. Again, this could be due to the VLE, better integration, but also due to online learning. And there's also a slight increase as well in the number of citations per list. That's all I wanted to say, Paula. Sorry.
Okay. What I thought might be nice just to kind of finish up was to think about things that might, what the pandemic might kind of accelerate, what we might see happening, you know, as a natural progression of what we've been through. So there was already, of course, a move, I think, for a lot of print collections to go to storage. We certainly have had that in Newcastle. We've got some off-site, some big off-site storage areas. But in the short term, if this, you know, if this is something that we have to deal with for a bit longer, in order to create that study space, do we move more print storage to print collections to storage? As I've already mentioned before, I think, you know, one thing it's shown us is that we maybe need to do a better job around helping academics and students to understand ebook licensing and how it works. They tend to get angry with us. They think it's our fault and that we're, you know, we're kind of withholding the books from them when clearly that isn't the case. They're just sometimes ridiculously expensive, as a lot of you will know. And I think that's been reflected in the recent moves really to try and work with ebook suppliers. I know there was a recent petition and there's been lots of renewed interest. I think I've mentioned about the library website and this kind of virtual front door. I think one thing again that you know, we found during lockdown, of course, people couldn't come in the building during the full lockdown, and look at our special and unique collections, and we do have some nice collections in Newcastle. And that's one thing, there was a big demand for that again during lockdown. So, you know, maybe it will accelerate. I know there's already loads of work around, you know, digitising those collections, but perhaps that'll be another kind of impetus to get more of that done. One thing we've done at Newcastle, we had a high demand collection really, quite small collection. We've been reading it consistently, but it was very short. In pre-lockdown, you could borrow these books for 4 hours. We've had to change that to allow people to use them for click and collect. So we've increased the loan time to 2 days to allow people to come. I am doubtful whether that collection will ever go back into that very short-term turnaround. I think it will probably stay. I think it might be just one of the ways that it makes us think about collections a little bit. On the staff front, I think, and again, these will be very common to all of you, but some of the things I think it's taught for us, and, you know, we've conversations at work and for us, remote meetings, I think, you know, we can see these continuing to carry on after when we get through this. And not just, I don't mean just in-house. I think if we think about where we are in Newcastle, we would often travel for 3 hours on a train to go to a meeting in London and then 3 hours back. I can't see that happening again somehow. Maybe it's just because we're in the middle of it, but it just seems so implausible now when we know maybe the pandemic has proven to us that we can do it remotely. I think what we have to be careful of is that equality of access. We have some people, although we've tried to really work with people and give them access to tech. You know, there are some people who just maybe don't have the Wi-Fi. You know, we have to think about that. I think it's proved, hopefully, that, you know, if anything, people have worked harder during lockdown and from home. It's been exhausting at times. Hopefully, we've proved to senior management that we can be trusted in this blended kind of work. And I'm not saying that, you know, we'll be working from home full time, but it's this blended work, and I would hope it's kind of proved itself a bit. For us at Newcastle, and this may just be one for us, we're in a bit of a mess sometimes with our information management. So we have shared drives with documents all over the place. The cyber attack and working from home, I think, has proven to us that we need to sort that out a bit, and that Teams works. That it's got some failings, but I think it's one we need to look at. I think a good thing as well is it has. I think in libraries we can be very slow to change. I think it's shown us, hopefully, that we can do things quickly. We have to do things quickly. Changing stuff, units out, changing terms of use, and changing whole services in very quick turnaround. I think we can. We've shown that we can be agile. We can try something. If it doesn't work, we can try something again. And I think hopefully we've learned from that to take a few more risks, really. This is a very short slide, and it looks like we didn't do much very well, but I suppose we're still in the middle of it, so I didn't get very far with this. I think we've survived, or we're still surviving. Like I've just said, I think we've learned to be a bit more proactive. Hopefully when we're slowly moving from that reactive to that proactive. I think we've had to be good at ebook provisioning, and I put some question marks there because maybe time will tell what else we've done well. I don't know. What we might do better, I won't list all of this because I know it's probably running out of time. But these are some of the things we might do better. So I do, and we as a library worry about equality of access. So people who maybe disabled users or disadvantaged users who haven't been able to come to the library, not wholly because they've been self-isolating, but they've chosen to, if they've chosen to study from home, to go home and study. We haven't got, I don't know, I think this was a big debate on some of the lists a while ago, but in terms of posting out physical items, we haven't had that service for people who just chose to study from home. We haven't done that because of the cost. So I do worry a little bit, and we worry a little bit about quality of access from that. I think from a staff point of view as well, I think the summer was all very well and quite nice working from home, but now we're looking at the winter and it feels like everybody's a bit tired of it. We worry about that as well. As I say, I won't read these all out because I'm sure you are facing similar things. I think one thing the person in charge of the buildings who's done an awful lot of space around, reusing the buildings in accordance with both national guidelines and then DSE guidelines, has said is worried about kind of a consistency of service. Who defines what service within that tier 3 is being provided across the board? Is it, is this what they mean or is this what they mean? And I think we could do a bit better and have a bit more of a consistency of service along that. I think that's all we wanted to say. I'm sorry, we kind of whistled through that, but I hope that's been useful. And I've told about emails around there if you've got any further questions.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you. Very interesting indeed. It impresses the numbers. I'm going to hand over to Tamar. You have the presenter rights now, Tamar. Feel free to share your screen.
Showing my screen. I hope you see it.
All good. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about maximizing the use of your reading list. So I'll be very brief and just talk about a few functionality that would be handy in these times. Let me start by the new reality. Well, as Paula said, and it's very obvious, we started by all switching to work from home, having either no access or limited access to the library facilities, and worrying primarily about physical items. Electronic items were handled properly, but physical items became a problem. So the top priority for most libraries was to replace the print materials, and the first thing was to identify all the physical materials, those required for courses, and then you need to make decisions. So what part was needed, when, and to whom, to how many students required that specific reading. Probably checking the priority, whether it's an essential material or not, past usage, locating existing online alternatives in the library. It could well be that the academic points to a physical book, but the library already has an e-book license. Leveraging the COVID-19 offerings. So this was actually very nice for Alma libraries. You could activate these collections and then run a job that compares the reading list, the citations on reading lists with all active resources, including those that were offered now for COVID-19. So that became very easy. Perhaps scans that you already had, so you can reuse them and digitize, or obviously work with the DCS to ensure the copyright compliance for scans. And basically advise the academics and the students about alternatives to physical materials. So I'm going to show you a few screens of Leganto. This is the citations screen. So those of you who use Leganto know that. I see all the citations across all reading lists. So it's very easy to narrow down to look at all, for example, in this case, only essential materials, only books, only those that are in the library, and then look at them and see what else can be done. I can drill down through various filters. I could generate reports, for example, physical items on highly used reading lists, or physical loans in the previous term. It's all in the same system, so I can get these two reports and use them as required. We added the functionality to find other formats in bulk, so I could run a job and to look at all those reading lists resources that are physical, and we already have, like in this case, we found 454 records of materials that are physical in reading lists, but some of them have electronic suggestions. Another option is to identify the scans that are already available in the system, so you don't need to rescan if you are doing that. And in general, we were looking at enhanced efficiencies, to do things in a better way. You needed to do more with the same staff and all the other challenges of being away. So this is a new screen, the screen of the modules, or the courses as they are called in Alma. We added facets on the left-hand side. We added the option to search for a course or a module using quite many fields. And then functionality such as to send an email in bulk to or a certain set of academics, or change module parameters such as start and end dates, or a message about submitting the list, or an indication by when they need to submit the list. We also added something else, which is a question that pops up when academics are adding materials to their lists. So this form is customizable, and it depends on the type of resource. The reason we added it is there is a lot of back and forth with the library to understand exactly what they need. So if they add a physical material, you probably want to say something, especially these times. You can say, okay, physical items are not available this semester. What would you like the library to do? And then you know everything that they want in one go. You don't need to go back and forth and understand each other. This is not limited to physical books. You can do that on other types of materials, or also in normal time. So here are two other examples of the type of things that you can ask the academics when they add an item. What do they want to do? We did other things. So, for example, automatically marking certain citations as complete. I mean, this was actually from day one, but you can decide that you don't have time to deal with everything that you've done in the past. So some items you're going to skip to make them complete without processing them. The rollover has changed with new functionality, so you don't need to worry about these. So, for example, at the end of the rollover, you can decide that the lists are published automatically. Automatic notifications for academics in certain cases, filters, and I mean, like we saw earlier, to filter the citation list and then work in bulk across all modules, and automatic purchase requests, for example, by priority, exist in inventory, etc. Another thing that we've added lately is insights for the library. Paula mentioned the challenge of concurrent licenses. You may want to identify bottlenecks, so like the kind of materials that you have either too few copies or too few concurrent licenses. On the other hand, you may want to see places where you can save, so you have too many concurrent licenses or copies on the shelf. So this is the kind of the report that comes up. So this is a report of those that you define. I mean, you define the threshold, what is too much or what is too little. So these are example of citations where you have less inventory or less options to serve the students, and here is the other way around. You have 5 concurrent users, but no full text were required for that specific citation. We also integrated with Rialto. So those of you who use Rialto or think of using it, it's now very simple. So in this case, on the left-hand side, you can see an academic added a citation to a reading list. When the selector sees the reading list in Rialto, the citation in Rialto, on the right-hand side, you can see how they have the full enrollment information in that course, so the name and the course on the actual term, and the number of participants. So it's easier to make decisions when you have the information at hand. Just to wrap up, I want to remind you that Leganto has new releases. You know, every month there is a new release, and there are many options in every release, many new features. Very often libraries cannot activate everything because they have other things to do, but remember to follow up and to get back to them. We added very nice videos, so it's easy to isolate the specific things that you're interested in and then and go back to them later. We added LibGuides in the Knowledge Center, so they give you more information, not just what you need to do to activate something, but more like a full workflow, more comprehensive information of what things mean, not just what you need to do. And thank you very much for all your ideas, and keep posting them, because many of the things that you've seen actually come from your ideas that you shared with us. So that was very brief. I hope it was useful. Thank you very much. I want to end with this just a final quote of Paul Harding from the University of York, who showed how Leganto was instrumental for the library's response to the pandemic, and the visibility of the reading lists allowed the library to manage resources effectively. And I think this is what we want, to make your work easier and to help you succeed in what you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you to everyone. I'm going to have a quick look through the chat and Q&A. We got a couple of questions or comments coming in. The first one I got several times during David's presentation, especially. I just would like to confirm that yes, we are going to share the presentation as a PDF, just that you are able to use the links that you all saw on David's presentation. There's one question, Paula and Stephen, that I would like to push to you. You touched a bit later in your presentation, but one question was, which I'm going to read it out for you. Which new services do you think are temporary because of COVID, and which one are you committed to making permanent?
Yeah, I saw that question and I had a bit of a think about it. And it's funny, isn't it? Because we, as a rule, we don't have available item requesting. So just it's on the shelf. Ordinarily, you wouldn't be able to put a request on, but obviously we have done that for click and collect, and it's been very popular, as Stephen pointed out with his figures. So that would have been something that I thought maybe would become a service. But it's funny, I was just talking to somebody before this call, and what we're finding is that students are just picking the whole of their reading list off and requesting them as click and collect. So students, and because we've lengthened our due dates, and because people can't come in as easily, we've got a fixed due date now until after Christmas. That is having a big impact on our collections, because students are going through their reading list, getting all the books that their tutors have said you should have, and then they've got them until Christmas or after Christmas. So we might have to re-look at that if that was one of the things we were thinking about, kind of making permanent, because we can't. And we've disabled normal recalls for now. We don't even have a proper recall system. Now we might restart that. So that would have been something I would have thought might have happened, but now I'm not so sure hearing about how that's being used at the minute. And that's about all I can think of. It's been the other things that we're doing in terms of like delivering laptops and delivering postal orders. I can't see that continuing beyond the pandemic. I don't know whether that answers your question, Lee. I'm sorry. I don't know whether, Stephen, you've got anything to say.
Okay. Okay, thank you. It's still a very unsure time, I believe.
Yeah.
So, we are a bit over the time, so I would like to thank especially to our presenters today. Thank you very much, David, Paula, Stephen, and Tamar. Thank you very much to give us these insights. I'm going to send out the recording, including the PDF presentations. If you have another question coming up between now and whatever, feel free, please, to contact us or contact the presenter. You will get all the contact details with the upcoming email latest tomorrow afternoon. Thank you very much and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, Daniela.